Story 1. You do not want to share your thoughts, experiences, and memories with them anymore. Story 2. This was from another Reddit user months ago when this question was asked. It always stuck with me. You can tell when you are not interested in the little things that make them happy, like making them a snack, sending nice text messages, showing random non-sexual physical affection, or doing one of their chores unprompted. Arguably, you could say that you are starting to no longer care about their happiness. Story 3. You do not want to be intimate with them anymore. That was my first sign. Story 4. Spending time with them starts to feel like an obligation or a chore. Story 5. I just want to add that a healthy long-term relationship can go through cycles where your feelings wax and wane, sometimes with different feelings in different directions. Do not immediately assume your love is diminishing because it can come back even stronger after a period of less interest. Being appreciative makes life worthwhile, but often it is impossible to hold that view all the time. Sometimes you have to get a bit lost in the details before understanding the true value of what you have. Story 6. Having a sense of dread about them. You dread spending time with them. You dread getting a message from them. You dread talking to them, calling them, or saying I love you to them. You may not notice it, but it has been a long time since you initiated anything. You might also have someone else in mind that you would rather tell first whenever you have something to talk about or something to do. You watch the clock waiting to leave and never linger once your time is up. There are no affectionate goodbyes. You are already off and running. You tell them you fell asleep very often. This is not accidental once or twice, but on purpose. Whenever you miss or ignore their messages or calls, the future looks bleak with them. The future looks better alone. You do not want to work things out. There is nothing to work on because, really, you just do not like them. You might have more frequent arguments, but oddly, this is the one thing that varies between couples when one or both fall out of love. Things that matter to them no longer take up space in your mind. You forget their birthday, forget plans you made together, and forget to tell them things happening in your life. When they are talking to you, it is easy for you to space out, miss what they are saying, and be generally disengaged. You might even walk away from them accidentally because you are not thinking to check if they are still behind you. To anyone falling out of love, I recommend breaking up quickly once you feel certain you no longer want that relationship. It is painful for the other person to watch you slip away like this if they still care. I have been both the person who watched someone slip away and the person who slipped away from others. You need to find the strength to end it clearly without mincing words because it will eventually explode. It is never easy to tell someone they are not right for you, but it must be done. If you want something to be over, it is your responsibility to end it. You may only get away with not doing anything if your partner is also slipping away and not messaging, calling, or reaching out at all. That is rare, but if it happens, you can either let it fade or send a quick message after a while to clarify it is over. Story 7. When you stop caring, even enough to get angry, it is a sign. I knew my last relationship was over when I realized I would not even be mad if he cheated on me. Story 8. For me, it was when I slowly realized the return on investment from my effort was not there, so I stopped putting in effort. Story 9. You stop sharing anything about yourself or your day because you do not want them to know anything about you anymore. You cherish time away from them. You dread being with them. Everything about them annoys you. You do not want to be intimate with them anymore. You do anything to pacify them or get them to leave you alone. You busy yourself with work, chores, childcare, or other reasonable responsibilities that keep you away from them. You feel complete indifference to their existence. Story 10. Coming home is no longer a pleasant feeling. 1. You are coming back from work or errands, but you delay your return home, preferring to stop somewhere first or sitting in your car a couple of blocks away, psychologically preparing yourself to enter the house. 2. You are at home and you hear the car pull up in the driveway or the keys in the door, and you think, oh no. Story 11. Here are some signs I felt with my ex when we were still together. I did not enjoy spending time with him. We stopped sharing and caring about each other's lives. My physical attraction faded. I felt emotionally distant, and I compared our relationship to others. Story 12. Honestly, man, you just know. The thought of losing them stops scaring you, I guess. Story 13. You seem obligated to talk or spend time with your partner rather than actually wanting to talk or spend time together. Story 14. Even though I loved and cared for them, I dreaded seeing them and began to resent them. I should have left way sooner, and it was mean of me to stay and try to make it work for so long. I was very angry at things they did early on, but it was the best relationship I have had, so I made excuses to stay. Story 15. You start enjoying time away from them more than time with them. Story 16. Everything you loved about them starts to irritate you. It feels like you cannot find a single thing you like about them anymore. Story 17. 1. Dreading texts from the people involved. 2. When you are on vacation without those individuals and you are genuinely happier not hearing from them. Story 18. If going to see them or making date plans feels more like a chore or an obligation than something you look forward to. Story 19. The feeling of resentment and lack of communication about the reasons. Story 20. When you don't care to argue with them about anything anymore, you have checked out and are never coming back. Story 21. You run to Reddit for poor relationship advice from strangers. Story 22. I cannot stand the sight of him. It happened when I overheard him speaking badly about me to my doctor while I was admitted to the emergency room with a near-death illness. I never got over it because it was a deep betrayal that I never expected. Now I know who he really is. There were so many other things along the way that I overlooked, but this was the end. Story 23. The sound of them eating makes you want to thrust a red-hot poker into their eye socket. Story 24. You stop going to bed together. People do it so they can have quiet time to themselves. It can be normal, but it can also be an escape for a person to catch their breath. Story 25. When you can't believe how long it takes them to tell a simple story from their day at work. So then Judy, she's the one whose sister's neighbor had that cute cactus statue in her backyard before it was ruined by a trick-or-treater? Or was it a loose dog? No, I'm pretty sure that it was the trick-or-treater. Story 26. If I have to remind myself to pay attention to them, when I am in love, I think of them even when they are not present, and I have no difficulty paying attention to them. Story 27. I saw something once that resonated with me, which was the car test. When you get home and see your partner's car in the driveway, do you feel happy or not? For the record, I like seeing my partner's car in the driveway. Story 28. You can go an entire day without wanting to talk or see them, as if their presence annoys you. Story 29. Love is not a feeling. The idea of being in love is the modern era's greatest lie. Love is a choice. It is a choice to respect, honor, and be dutiful to someone even when it is not convenient, even if it is difficult. Lust and desire are feelings you can fall out of. Love is a choice, and giving up on someone is a choice, not because you fell out of something. Every couple I have talked to with lifelong marriages always said the same thing. There are long stretches in any committed relationship where it is stale, stagnant, and sometimes even unpleasant. But it is the choice to stay and the choice to figure out how to rekindle the relationship that is the most important. Abuse and affairs are different. That is always the response. Those two things effectively relieve the other person in the relationship of any duty to even try. But short of those two things, if you are committing to loving someone, you do it even when you do not feel like doing it. If you are not willing to do it, then you do not fall out of love, you made a choice to no longer commit to the person. Story 30. They lie to you about what they are really doing behind your back. Finding out the hidden agenda is a deal breaker. Story 31. When you cannot pretend to care about things they like but you do not have any interest in them. For example, if he likes cars, you cannot even pretend to be interested when he talks about them. Story 32. Looking forward to them leaving the house for the day, not looking forward to their return. Story 33. There are a few common signs. You never close your eyes anymore when you kiss their lips. There is no tenderness right before in your fingertips. There is no welcoming look in your eyes when they reach for you. You are starting to criticize little things they do. Story 34. When you start counting down the days until your next Netflix binge alone. Story 35. She brings home a date, and you are most concerned he is going to drink your beer. Story 36. If you ask yourself the question, Am I falling out of love with my partner? 95% of the time you have your answer. Story 37. Our couples counselor told us he knew we would make it through because when either of us got emotional, we reached for each other. So, I guess if you do not do that anymore. Story 38. When you no longer look forward to meeting them and instead become indifferent. Story 39. Nervously checks marriage? Yep, we're fine. I'm glad you all got out of your bad relationships. I had to think back to my girlfriend before my wife 25 years ago for this question. It was exactly as many of you said. I started to dislike going home. I made excuses to stay out longer. When I was home, I felt annoyed by her presence. I was sad when I broke up with her, but I knew it was the right thing. We both did. We had a good cry together. We were together for almost 3 years. Then we went out for pizza and enjoyed each other's company for the first time in a long time because we were both ready to move on. My wife now, I called her at work today to tell her what silly thing our little puppy did this morning, and we had a good laugh about it. Story 40. Spending time with them drains your energy instead of giving you energy. Story 41. I am very much a giver, but the second it is not reciprocated, I am out. I am not talking about 100% give and take all the time, but you can easily notice when it is 80-30 or 90-10. Story 42. When you are happier and more relaxed when you are not around them. Story 43. You start to resent the things that you used to find cute or attractive. Story 44. When you start to be annoyed by small things they do that did not used to bother you. I am not talking about things that are big enough to warrant a discussion to fix, but simple things. I hope that makes sense, as I cannot think of an example. Story 45. For me, it was not wanting to be as intimate, getting annoyed by them easily, and my ex was unpleasant, so I would get disgusted by him. I could not stand him. Story 46. When I stopped showing any form of physical intimacy to her or receiving any from her, I stopped hugging, kissing, and cuddling, going days without physically touching her. It was not even a conscious decision. I just could not love her anymore. Story 47. When your heart drops as you hear the garage door opening. Story 48. You are just not interested or excited to be around them or do things with them anymore. Activities you once found enjoyable with them start to seem like a chore. Your brain switches off and you just go through the motions to please them or maintain the status quo. You start feeling guilty out of nowhere because whatever you are reciprocating does not feel genuine anymore. That is when you know. Story 49. When they start to feel like a responsibility in the way that a child does instead of an equal partnership. Story 50. When you start feeling indifferent about them instead of looking forward to seeing them. Story 51. You cannot discuss concerns before they actually become problems. Story 52. When you would rather not be around them than be with them. Story 53. The biggest issue for me with my most recent ex was feeling disgusted with him and not wanting to be around him. Story 54. When they feel like a chore, a burden, or a child, you do not want to be put into the parent role when dating someone. This is the quickest romance killer. Story 55. Meeting someone nice and thinking they would be a better fit for your partner than you are. Inviting more and more people over all the time so you do not have to be alone with them. Traveling alone as often as possible. Not caring when they make unwise financial mistakes because you subconsciously know you will not be there. Not wanting to touch. Story 56. You do not innately want to do things for them, even minor things you know they will like. It means you are harboring some resentment, possibly subconsciously. Story 57. No unproductive arguing or no arguing at all. My wife and I have always bickered, but it is how we roll. The fire is there. If that ever stops, we will be in trouble. Story 58. Limited or no desire to plan or do things with family members. You would rather be doing things alone, with friends, or with other people more often than with family members. Story 59. When the person you are with does not make you feel safe, genuinely happy, graced by their presence, or gives you bad anxiety or pressure, it means you have been with them for a long time, but you feel negative around them all the time. Story 60. Not wanting to talk as much regardless of schedule freedoms. Story 61. When spending time with them or talking to them starts to feel like a chore, And the predominant emotions in your mind are suffocation, anxiety, guilt, and emptiness. Story 62. Hear me out. Falling out of love is not a thing. Love is an act. It is a decision. Perhaps people decide they do not want to give or receive love from someone anymore. There are many valid reasons for that. However, I believe you can always choose to love someone. This comes from someone who has lived through these devastating feelings and learned the importance of choosing to love and asking for love in return. All these years later, it is not perfect, but there is no doubt we are in love. Story 63. With all this negativity, please remember that sometimes people get upset with each other, but it does not automatically mean you should give up. Story 64. When you feel less like you are in a relationship and more like you are carrying a dead animal carcass on your back. Story 65. When you no longer ask questions or care about their feelings or concerns. Story 66. Relationships are like cars. The older they are, the more maintenance it takes to keep them out of the junkyard. Story 67. The way you say their name begins to sound like a roll call list and not like you are saying the name of someone you miss seeing. Story 68. When you finish your third double shift in a row and cry as you go home. Story 69. If you imagine your life without them and it sounds okay. Story 70. You feel relaxed when they are away, and when they are around, you prefer to stay in your own corner of the house. Story 71. For me, I lost the physical attraction. We are 13 years into our marriage, and the spark went out about 4 years ago. I have also lost all interest in sex. It has become a chore to be avoided. Yet, I still love him and find comfort in his presence in my life. He is a good man and he adores me. Story 72. From the opposite end of the spectrum, as someone who realized their partner no longer loved them, was when my wins no longer became our wins. Her wins were always my wins, but my wins never mattered. There was a single day when I made $8,000. I ended up making over $30,000 that month. It was the culmination of everything I had been working for to provide her and our future family the life I felt they deserved. I was so excited to share it with her. I was excited to say, "We're no longer in debt. We've made it." Her response, "That's great." In a monotone, completely uncaring way. I thought she would be jumping with happiness. I was wrong. She didn't love me anymore, and that was the moment I knew for sure. Story 73. You do not want to listen to the little things anymore, like, "Look what I found. What is that outside the window?" or other side notes you no longer care about. Story 74. As always, the opposite of love is not hate. It is apathy. It is like they could break up with you in the most diabolical fashion, and you just do not care anymore. You would not care if they were with 20 different people every day. Story 75. When you lose the energy to confront the challenges that need to be addressed, it is important to recognize the signs. I spent too long on my last relationship, where the same arguments kept repeating. Arguments are a part of any relationship, but once they reach a point where you do not even want to speak to the other person or feel relief when they give you the silent treatment, it is time to call it quits. Story 76. The famous relationship psychologist Esther Perel says that the number one sign of an impending divorce is contempt. If you do not admire your partner, if you start to get annoyed by their little quirks, those are signs of contempt and losing respect for that person. By that point, it is pretty much over. Story 77. I used to sleep in my car with my cat and dog, even though I owned the condominium. Story 78. When their presence annoys you. This happened to me with my ex. I straight up told him I did not want to spend time with him, and every time he walked into the room, I was annoyed. We split about a week later when I left him. Story 79. When you know it is time to leave, because you have tried everything you can think of to keep things alive but nothing changes. The pain of falling out of love alone seems easier than staying to watch each other drift apart. For me, feeling alone and heartbroken in the relationship was more unbearable than feeling alone and heartbroken by myself. Story 80. You start asking strangers online what the signs of falling out of love are. Story 81. That you can imagine your life without them, and it makes you happy. Story 82. For me, it is when I stop trying. I am a person who believes that proper discussion and both of us working together are crucial in a relationship. I will fight hard to keep that going, but if I see that the other person is a lost cause, then I can clearly notice the moment I fall out of love. Story 83. Constantly envisioning a future without them brings you joy. Story 84. When your patience with them wears off and you are angry or annoyed at them for a small thing that did not bother you at all a few years ago. Story 85. The smell on my clothes that I lent them stopped being something that made me happy and think of them. Instead, I started to be increasingly repulsed by it. There were other things, but others have mentioned many of them already. Story 86. For me, it was when I finally realized that I did not want to be seen with them in public because it felt embarrassing. Story 87. One girl I dated and I would talk on the phone every weekday night. I started to dread receiving those phone calls when I realized I was not attracted to her. We did not have much in common, and we were both holding back due to our recent breakups. So the breakup was mutual. Story 88. You instinctively move away when they try to touch you. Story 89. Losing physical interest. Feeling dreadful whenever the topic of the future comes up. They stop taking you on dates and you do not even care. Loving kissing but not anymore with them. Story 90. He asks if I love him and I do. I am just not in love with him. Story 91. You cannot even bother to fight with them anymore because you just no longer care. Story 92. Little things you never noticed annoy you. The way they chew, sigh loudly, or flip the pages in their books. Once you notice those things and they bother you, it is hard to stop being bothered by them. Story 93. Wishing they were gone. Disliking the sight of them. Disliking the sound of their keys opening the front door. Disliking the sound of their voice and preferring to sleep anywhere but in bed with them. No longer caring about any issues they have, whether illness, financial, or family-related. Ignoring their calls and texts. Making sure you eat but indifferent to whether they do since you no longer cook for them. Daydreaming about the day you end the relationship and become single again. Imagining the future and feeling immense joy knowing they will not be part of it. Such a happy day. I could continue, but I will stop here. Story 94. They become a source of stress instead of a safe haven of peace. Story 95. Long-distance relationships became a chore because I had to call every day to go through the day. I felt relief and freedom whenever we hung up. There was tension and anxiety when we were together. Like, I have to show her that I love her. With my wife, I can't wait to call her about the tiniest things when we are both working. Whenever we are together, I feel at home and completely at peace. I do not have to make an effort to show her that I love her. It just comes naturally. Story 96. Wow. All the comments in this subreddit made me realize how every other person feels this way. It makes me wonder how many of you mentally check out before you actually leave the house. Story 97. There is a cause for all the reasons people are posting. Everyone is sharing their symptoms, but nobody is looking for the actual infection. Rediscover love. Try harder and be consistent. People give up too quickly. Story 98. You ask Reddit for signs that you are falling out of love with your partner. Story 99. My wife stayed at home. I worked the swing shift. When I came home, it was always the same story as to why she didn't do much during the day. She was sick, tired, or something came up. I started drinking more often because I'd rather live in my memories than be present in a home I worried about and struggled to pay for. We have 4 children who were fairly young at the time. I wanted her to get a job. She owed $100,000 in student loan debt for a degree she didn't use. When we made love, 90% of the time I was the one initiating. I felt unloved, both in the bedroom and outside, by a woman who didn't really want to touch me, didn't want to put forth much effort cooking and cleaning, and wasn't concerned about household finances. I yelled. I drank. I felt trapped. I was too busy and blind to see how depressed she was and how maybe I could have been more supportive. I thought she'd just get over whatever it was, that we'd power through, and that it would be okay sometime in the future. I was wrong. Never forget that being with someone takes work. That it's going to be difficult sometimes. That there are subtle signs a person shows when he or she isn't feeling well. If you think it's going to magically get better if you bring home more money or if someone just does one or two things differently, please go to counseling, church, or anything that can save your family, especially if there are children involved. Story 100. Asking questions such as, what are the signs you are falling out of love with your partner? Story 101. When touching or kissing them just feels like you are doing something to keep the spark alive, and physical affection begins to feel like a performance so they do not suspect anything. Story 102. They talk and you just feel frustrated. It is not specifically what they are saying, but rather that they are saying anything at all. Story 103. Everything about them irritates you, no matter how irrational. Story 104. When you feel lonelier with them than by yourself. Story 105. When weird quirks they had that you once thought were cute are now extraordinarily annoying. Story 106. Suddenly, after 2 years, I found him kind of ugly. I had found him attractive previously, but all of a sudden, I was looking at his face and found him gross to look at. Story 107. When they no longer care or even try to make it work. Story 108. Not wanting to spend time with them and never initiating plans. Feeling annoyed when they reach out. Story 109. If you feel like you are starting to drift apart and no longer care whether you see or talk to them on any given day. Story 110. What always fascinates me about this is how much misery people endure rather than be alone. Story 111. I knew it was time to divorce my first husband when I spat in the soup I made him for dinner. Story 112. When we broke up, I did not cry at all. I emotionally checked out months prior. Story 113. Reading the comments makes me feel like my partner never loved me at all. I always knew our relationship was not very traditional in terms of the type of people we are. But every single thing mentioned in these comments has been the way he is since day one. I always thought it was because he has zero emotional intelligence, no introspection, and a complete inability to live as a couple or think as a team. He is an extremely solo person, wakes up, works, watches his TV shows, or plays his video games with headphones on, never once trying to involve me. Sometimes days go by where our only interactions are about what food we want to eat that day. I feel like I cannot rely on him to take care of me. He has failed multiple times to show that he thinks something like, she feels bad. Maybe I should do something. We're similar. But I am also the type of person who hates relying on others. I have joked to my friend that no self-respecting woman would date a guy like him, and that he is definitely not what most women dream of. I am sometimes confused about whether I want anything more normal. But at the same time, in a way, I feel like this type of relationship works for me. I call it companionship, just having someone there. Story 114. Love is a choice when it is not an emotion, which is most of the time. Story 115. When talking to them feels like a chore and you are not excited to share things with them. Story 116. Things that used to make you upset do not bother you anymore. Story 117. When you find yourself scheduling a colonoscopy on your anniversary because it is more enjoyable than a night out with your partner. Story 118. When you do not care enough to argue, maybe you would rather not interact with them at all for a long period of time. Once in a while is okay, but when it is all the time, it is probably over. I know many women who have the mentality of, I will never date someone I have been friends with for a long time. I do not know any men like this, but I am sure there are some out there. Anyway, I think this is why many relationships fail. If you cannot even be friends with someone, why would you stay with them forever? Once the lust is gone, you are left with a person you are either going to tolerate or not. I see many couples who have nothing in common. They literally would never be friends if they met for the first time today. It is not just a lot of couples. It is a standard. How many of you are with someone you are just convincing yourself is your soulmate when you would never be friends? I have many male gamer friends who are with women who not only do not play any video games, but some of them actively dislike video games and want their partners to play less or quit the hobby altogether. Why would you want to be with someone like that other than, we both just got attracted one night, and now we do not want to be alone until we cannot stand each other and get uncomfortable enough to stop being lazy and move on, wasting both of our lives? Literally, all my friends who are into gaming, computers, anime, and comic books date or dated. Women who had zero interest in all of those things. They just liked basic things like reality television and popular music. All my family members have spouses or partners they clearly do not even like anymore. The only exception in my entire life is my aunt and uncle. Ever since I was a kid, they have been the same exact way. They act like best friends, have nicknames for each other, laugh at each other's jokes, and make each other smile. From when I was a little kid to this day, they have been together since before I was born in the 1970s. Every other person's relationship ends or they remain and are always just annoyed with each other, giving short, upset responses like, okay, have your way, or whatever. I believe relationships that start as genuine friendships end as genuine friendships. But it is difficult to find friends as an adult. On top of that, it is difficult to find women in my generation and age group who are willing to be friends and then go to the next level if there is potentially more there. It is either we are just dating because we are attracted to each other for now, or you are getting friend-zoned and that is the end of that. Then there is the whole casual dating culture where people are just sleeping around with everyone, not getting into relationships. This is fine if everyone is consenting and aware, but it makes it even more difficult to find someone you are going to be in a forever relationship with. Once the lust is not enough, you are always going to be left with someone you hate, tolerate, or would actually die for because they are actually your friend at the end of it all. Story 119. You do not look forward to spending time with them. Where you used to return their calls, texts, emails, or other messages as soon as possible, now you take your time getting back to them. You do not argue anymore. Not because you agree on everything, you do not, but because you do not care or it is too exhausting to resolve conflicts. Alternatively, it may seem like all you do is argue. The arguments become really nasty with name-calling, threats to leave, yelling, throwing things, and so on. You are having less sex and do not feel connected during the sex you do have, as if you are both literally and figuratively just going through the motions. You find yourself rationalizing or making excuses, such as, I moved in with him to save on the rent, or she is just going through a lot at work. Qualities you used to like or find endearing or charming about them now annoy you endlessly. You keep breaking up and getting back together. You have cheated or contemplated cheating. Story 120. Cracking open Reddit. AskReddit to ask this. Hope you are okay. Original poster. Story 121. Falling out of love is the act of losing the connection that once held your relationship together. It is feeling an infinite distance from someone you once felt close to. It is the fading of small things like cooking his favorite meal or bringing her flowers from time to time. It is when the smell of her hair no longer captivates you, and his voice loses the warmth that once made you feel safe. It is comfort replacing effort, routine instead of excitement. It is walking the same path when you are meant for a greater one and resenting your partner for it. It is feeling lonely while sleeping in the same bed, with no longing for his touch or her kiss. It is secretly desiring a life without her but fearing the loss of everything you have built together. It is the guilt of walking away and wondering if you are making a mistake or setting yourself free. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.